The silence was supposed to be a luxury. After dropping my daughter in Lake Briar for 2 weeks, I expected relief, not the hollow ache of an empty house. Then Evan, my lawn guy, called. He was not asking about payment. His voice was tight. He swore he heard soft crying coming from my basement, right before the bulkhead lock clinked, like someone was down there testing the latch from the inside, waiting for me to come home. The drive back from Lake Briar felt longer than the hour and a half it actually took. I had spent the last 10 miles gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles had turned the color of old parchment. Leaving Sophie was not something I was good at yet. We were 18 months into the divorce, and the custody schedule still felt like an amputation I had to undergo every other weekend. But this was different. This was 2 weeks. 2 whole weeks of summer vacation she would spend with her father and his new fiancé, leaving me with a block of time so vast and empty it felt threatening. When I finally pulled into the driveway of my house in Maple Hollow, the silence of the neighborhood hit me before I even cut the engine. It was a Tuesday afternoon, humid and still. Maple Hollow was the kind of place where lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives, and neighbors knew the make and model of every car that turned onto the street. It was safe. It was predictable. It was exactly where a 33-year-old single mother was supposed to live to prove she was holding it all together. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air conditioning was humming, a low mechanical drone that usually went unnoticed. But today it sounded deafening against the lack of other noises. No television blaring cartoons, no footsteps thumping on the second floor, no voice calling out for a snack. Just the house, breathing around me. I dropped my keys in the ceramic bowl on the entryway table, the clatter startlingly loud. I told myself this was relief. I told myself I needed this break to catch up on work, to organize the pantry, to sleep past 7 in the morning. I walked into the kitchen and poured a glass of water. Leaning against the granite island, the house felt huge. It was an old colonial, built in the 20s, with bones that creaked and groaned when the temperature shifted. I had fought to keep it in the divorce settlement, mostly for Sophie, but standing there in the kitchen, I felt a sudden, sharp pang of isolation. I was the captain of a ghost ship. That first evening passed in a blur of forced productivity. I answered emails. I cleaned the refrigerator. I went to bed early, lying in the center of the mattress, listening to the settling noises of the timber and drywall. I slept fitfully, waking up twice thinking I heard Sophie calling for water, only to remember she was 60 miles away. The next afternoon, the illusion of peace shattered. I was in my home office, trying to focus on a spreadsheet for a client, when my cell phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. The screen flashed the name Evan Rourke. Evan was my lawn guy, the owner of Rourke Yard and Snow. He was young, maybe 22, hard-working and polite, the kind of kid who always took his boots off if he had to step inside to sign an invoice. I answered, expecting a question about the invoice or a schedule change. "Hello, Evan," I said. "Ms. Henderson?" His voice was tight. It lacked its usual easygoing cadence. He sounded out of breath, like he had walked briskly away from something. "Yes, it is me. Is everything okay?" "I am outside," he said. "I was just trimming around the back, near the bulkhead doors, the basement entrance." "Did you hit a sprinkler head again?" I asked, trying to keep the tone light. "I told you not to worry about that one near the hydrangeas." "No, ma'am, it is not that." He paused. The silence on the line was heavy with static. "I think you need to come home if you are not there, or maybe call someone." My stomach did a slow, cold flip. "I am home, Evan. I am inside. What is wrong?" "You are inside?" He sounded surprised, almost alarmed. "Okay, that is good. But listen, I was down there with the weed whacker, and I turned the engine off to check the line feed. It was quiet, and I heard something." "Heard what?" "Crying," he said. I blinked, staring at the cursor blinking on my computer screen. "Crying? Like a cat? There are stray cats that get under the porch sometimes." "No," Evan said firmly. "Not a cat. It was human. It sounded like a person trying not to be loud. Just these little hitches of breath. Soft sobbing. It was coming right through the metal doors. A chill pricked the back of my neck, sliding down my spine. Evan, that is impossible. The basement is empty. I am the only one here. I know it sounds crazy, he said. I almost did not call, but then I heard the lock. The lock? I asked, my voice rising. The bulkhead padlock hasp, he said. I heard the metal clink, distinctly, like someone on the inside pushed the handle up to test if it was locked. They rattled it, Ms. Henderson, and the crying stopped the second the metal clinked. The phone felt slippery in my hand. The image Evan painted, someone standing on the concrete steps on the other side of those slant doors, listening to him, testing the lock, was so vivid, it made bile rise in my throat. Stay there, I said. I am coming out. I hung up and moved before I could think about the danger. I grabbed the heavy flashlight I kept in the utility drawer. Though it was broad daylight, and marched to the back door, I did not go out immediately. I paused at the glass, looking into the backyard. Evan was standing near the oak tree, about 20 feet back from the bulkhead doors. His weed whacker lying on the grass, he looked pale. He was watching the slanted metal doors like they were about to burst open. I unlocked the back door and stepped out onto the patio. The heat of the afternoon was oppressive, heavy with the scent of cut grass and gasoline. I walked over to Evan. Are you sure? I asked. I am 100% sure, Evan said. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of a gloved hand. I know sounds, Ms. Henderson. I wear hearing protection half the day, so when I take it off, my ears are sensitive. It was right there, a sob, then clink-clink against the hasp, then nothing. I looked at the bulkhead. It was an old steel unit, painted a dark green that matched the shutters. The padlock I used was a heavy-duty master lock. Threaded through the hasp on the outside, it looked undisturbed. I need to check it, I said. Do you want me to go down with you? Evan asked. He looked like he desperately hoped I would say no. No, I said, trying to project a calmness I did not feel. If the padlock is on the outside, nobody could be trapped inside unless they came from the house, and I have been in the house all day. Maybe they got in another way and tried to get out this way? Evan suggested. Maybe, I said. I turned and went back inside the house, locking the back door behind me. I walked to the door that led to the basement. It was in the hallway off the kitchen. I stared at the white wood. It was closed. I always kept it closed. I put my hand on the knob. It was cool to the touch. I turned it and opened the door. Darkness greeted me, smelling of dry dust and old concrete. I flipped the switch at the top of the stairs. The single bulb at the bottom flickered to life, casting long, sharp shadows across the wooden steps. Hello? I called out. My voice echoed slightly, bouncing off the stone foundation. Silence answered me, not the heavy silence of the house upstairs, but a hollow, watching silence. I gripped the flashlight and descended, the wooden stairs creaking under my weight. 1, 2, 3 steps. I paused, listening. Nothing. I reached the concrete floor. The basement was a sprawling, unfinished space. It was cluttered with the debris of a decade of living. Plastic bins labeled XMAS, stacks of old magazines, Sophie's old baby furniture covered in sheets, a workbench my ex-husband had bought and never used. I swept the flashlight beam into the corners where the overhead bulb did not reach. Is anyone down here? I demanded, my voice shaking slightly. No answer. I walked toward the bulkhead doors. They were at the far end of the basement, up a short flight of concrete steps. I climbed the steps and examined the interior handle. It was a simple latch mechanism. I pushed on it. It held firm against the padlock outside. I looked at the floor at the base of the bulkhead steps. Dust, a thick layer of gray dust that accumulates in basements no matter how often you sweep. I shone the light on the dust. It was disturbed, not much, but enough. There were scuffs, as if someone had shuffled their feet. But it was the clutter nearby that caught my eye. A metal shelving unit, the kind that holds paint cans and spray bottles, was shifted. It was pulled away from the wall by about 4 inches. I knew it used to be flush because I had wedged a piece of cardboard under the leg to stop it from wobbling, and now the cardboard was lying free on the floor. I turned around, scanning the rest of the room. My old dehumidifier, a bulky beige unit I ran during the humid months, was sitting near the sump pump. It was silent. I walked over to it. The plug was lying on the floor. I frowned. I never unplugged it. I only turned it off at the dial. Why would it be unplugged? Then I saw it. Near the floor drain, in the center of the room, there was a mark on the concrete. The floor was generally dry, dusty gray concrete, but right next to the drain grate, there was a darker patch. I crouched down. It was a footprint. It was faint, already drying at the edges, but it was unmistakably the print of a sneaker. It was wet, as if someone had stepped in a puddle outside and then walked in here. But it was just one, a single, isolated wet print in a dry basement. I touched it. Damp. The air in the basement suddenly felt very thin. Someone had been here, recently enough that the water hadn't evaporated. I stood up and backed away, keeping the flashlight trained on the shadows. I retreated up the stairs, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I locked the basement door and leaned against it, breathing hard. I went back outside to Evan. "Did you find anything?" he asked. "No," I lied. I did not want to involve the lawn boy in whatever this was. I needed him to think I was safe so he would leave. And I could think. It must have been the pipes. The water heater makes noises when it refills, and the wind can rattle the doors. Evan looked unconvinced, but he nodded. "Okay, if you say so, but it sounded real. Thank you for telling me. Evan, I appreciate it." I watched him pack up his truck and drive away. As soon as he was gone, the isolation descended on me again, heavier than before. I spent the rest of the afternoon pacing. I checked every window. I checked the front door, the back door, the side door. All locked. I went back to the basement door and checked it again. Locked. Night fell slowly, dragging long shadows across the lawn. I sat in the living room with all the lights on. I tried to read a book, but the words swam on the page. I kept replaying the conversation with Evan. He heard crying. And then the realization hit me, so hard I actually gasped. Evan did not know Sophie was gone. Evan came every 2 weeks. He had no way of knowing my custody schedule. He assumed, like everyone else, that a mother in a suburban house had a child in it. If Evan thought the crying was real, he probably thought it was Sophie, or me. But if someone else was down there, if the intruder was real, did they know Sophie was gone? If they knew the house was supposed to be empty of children, why cry like a child? Or if they were crying because they were hurt or stuck, why hide when Evan walked by? The thought that terrified me most was the alternative. What if they didn't know? What if someone had broken in, expecting an empty house to rob, and was hiding? But burglars don't cry. Burglars don't test locks from the inside and then stay silent. It felt less like a targeted threat against me personally and more like something parasitic, like opportunistic trespassing. A squatter. Someone looking for a place to sleep. The single wet footprint. Where did the water come from? It hadn't rained in 3 days. I looked at the clock. 9:30 at night. I could not stay in the house alone without doing something. I picked up my phone and dialed the non-emergency line for the Maple Hollow Police Department. Maple Hollow Police, non-emergency. A dispatcher answered. "Hi, my name is Alice Henderson. I live at 412 Cedar Lane. I would like to request an officer to do a walkthrough of my property. I found some disturbing signs in my basement. Is there an intruder in the house now, ma'am?" "I don't know. I don't think so. But things have been moved, and my lawn service worker heard noises earlier. We will send a patrol car over when one becomes available." It took 40 minutes. I waited by the front window, peeling back the curtain every time a car passed. Finally, a cruiser pulled up. The officer who came to the door was older, with a thick mustache and a nameplate that read, Officer Miller. He looked tired. Ms. Henderson? He asked. Yes, thank you for coming. You reported a possible break-in? Not exactly. Someone was in my basement. I found a wet footprint and things moved. He nodded, adjusting his belt. Mind if I take a look? I led him to the basement door. I unlocked it and let him go down first. I followed, staying on the bottom step while he clicked on a heavy-duty tactical flashlight. He swept the room. He looked behind the furnace. He looked in the corners. He walked over to the bulkhead and pushed on it. Seems secure, he said. The footprint was here, I said. Walking over to the drain, I pointed. The spot was dry now. There was a faint outline, maybe, if you squinted and knew where to look. But to him, it probably just looked like a stain on the concrete. I see a stain, Miller said. It was wet earlier, and the dehumidifier was unplugged. Do you have pets? He asked. No. Old houses, Miller said, looking up at the exposed rafters. They drafty. Moisture builds up. Sometimes plugs work themselves loose from vibration if the washer is running. The washer was not running, I said, feeling defensive. And my lawn guy heard crying. Miller smiled, a condescending lifting of the corner of his mouth. Crying, ma'am? Animals get into vents. Raccoons can sound like human babies when they are distressed. Foxes, too. It is unnerving. I know, but it is common. He said he heard the lock clink. Metal expands and contracts in the heat, Miller said. He walked back toward the stairs. Look, Ms. Henderson, there is no sign of forced entry. Windows are intact. Doors are locked. Nothing is missing? I haven't checked everything, but no, not obviously. You are alone here? My daughter is with her father for 2 weeks. First time she has been gone that long? I bristled. Yes. Why does that matter? Miller sighed, his tone gentle but dripping with implication. Stress can make old houses sound haunted. Ma'am, when the house is quiet, you hear things you normally tune out, the refrigerator humming, the pipes settling, the mind fills in the blanks. It is natural anxiety. He was calling me hysterical. He was telling me I was a lonely, stressed-out divorcee, imagining boogeymen because I missed my kid. I know what I saw, I said, but my voice lacked force. I sounded petty even to myself. If you hear anything else, call us, Miller said. But honestly, I think you have got a drafty basement and maybe a squirrel in the chimney. He left. I locked the door behind him, feeling a flush of embarrassment heat my cheeks. He was probably laughing about me in the cruiser. The lady at 412 is hearing ghosts. I walked into the kitchen, angry at myself. Maybe he was right. Maybe the footprint was just condensation dripping from a pipe I hadn't noticed. Maybe the dehumidifier cord was loose. I went to the entryway to check the front door lock again. I reached for the ceramic bowl where I kept the spare keys. It was a blue decorative bowl on the console table. I looked down. There were 3 keys in the bowl usually. The spare car key for my Honda, the key to my mother's house, and the spare house key, a brass Schlager key with a square head. I saw the car key. I saw my mother's key. And I saw a brass key with a square head. I picked it up. It felt light, too light. I turned it over in my hand. It was blank. It was an uncut key. It had the same shape head, the same brass finish, but the blade was smooth. It had no ridges, no teeth. I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't stress. Someone had taken my spare key, the one that opened the front door, the back door, and the deadbolts, and replaced it with a dummy. They had done it so that at a glance, the bowl looked normal. I ran to the front door and jammed the blank key into the lock. It slid in, but it wouldn't turn. Of course it wouldn't turn. My spare key was gone. Someone had it. The embarrassment from the police visit evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard knot of fear. This wasn't a drifter. A drifter doesn't carry a matching blank key to swap out so you don't notice. This was premeditated. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to Marjorie Sloane's number. Marjorie lived next door. She was a retiree with too much time and a window that faced my driveway. Since the divorce, she had appointed herself my unofficial guardian, which mostly meant she texted me whenever I left my garage door open for more than 10 minutes. "Alice?" Marjorie answered on the second ring. "Is everything all right? I saw the police cruiser." "Marjorie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "did you see anyone at my house today? Or yesterday? Besides the lawn service?" "No, dear. Just you. And the police just now." "Why? What happened?" "I think someone took my spare key from inside the house." "Oh, Alice," Marjorie said, her voice dropping to a hush. "Are you sure you didn't just misplace it?" I am staring at a blank key in the bowl. "Marjorie, someone swapped it." "Well," Marjorie said, "that is odd. But Alice, listen to me. You know how people talk." "What does that mean?" "I mean, calling the police. Having a cruiser in the driveway with the lights flashing. It sends a message. Maple Hollow is sensitive to drama. You don't want people thinking there is a problem at your house. It affects property values. It affects how people see you." I was stunned. "Marjorie, someone might have a key to my house." "I am sure it is a misunderstanding," she said soothingly. But there was an edge to it. "Maybe your ex-husband took it. Maybe Sophie played with it. Just avoid making a scene, dear, for your own sake. You know how hard it is for single women to establish stability." I hung up on her. The conversation left a greasy feeling in my mind. Avoid making a scene. It was the mantra of this town. Don't look at the ugly thing. Pretend everything is fine. I was not going to pretend. I spent the next hour in a frenzy of activity. I could not change the door locks tonight. I didn't have the tools or the replacements, but I could secure the basement. I went to the garage and found a heavy chain and a new padlock I had bought for a bike and never used. I went outside, flashlight in my teeth, and wrapped the chain around the bulkhead handles, securing it with the new lock. If anyone was down there, they were trapped. If anyone was outside trying to get in, they weren't getting through those doors. I came back inside and ordered a set of wireless security cameras on my phone for overnight delivery. I checked every window latch again. I wedged a chair under the doorknob of the basement door in the hallway. I told myself the crying was a misunderstanding. Evan was young. Maybe he heard a cat. The footprint was just a drip. The key. The key was the only thing I couldn't explain away. But maybe Marjorie was right. Maybe my ex had taken it weeks ago and replaced it with a blank as a sick joke. It sounded like something he might do in his passive-aggressive moments. I took a shower, washing the sweat and dust off, but I couldn't wash away the feeling of being watched. I got into bed around 11. The house was dark. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, straining my ears. The silence was heavy. Then, I heard it. It came through the floor vent near the corner of the bedroom. The ductwork connected the whole house, acting like a primitive intercom system. It was a sound, soft, muffled, whoosh, like wind blowing across the top of a bottle. But then it changed. It hitched, a sharp intake of air, and then a low, trembling vibration. It sounded like a sob. A human sob, cut short, as if a hand had been clamped over a mouth. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. I held my breath, waiting. Silence. Just the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Just the settling of the house. But I knew what I had heard. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a pipe. Someone was crying in my house, and they were doing it quietly enough that only the house itself could hear them. Daylight has a way of mocking your night terrors. When the sun streamed through the sheer curtains of my bedroom the next morning, hitting the dust motes dancing in the air. The panic from the night before felt foolish. It was just a house. It was just wood and nails and settling pipes. I sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my face, and decided that I would prove myself wrong. I would approach this like a project manager, not a frightened woman alone in a big house. I spent the next 3 hours conducting a forensic audit of the noises in my home. I went to the basement first. It was humid down there, the air thick and still. I walked over to the sump pump in the corner. I lifted the float switch, forcing the pump to engage. It let out a guttural thrum-gurgle-thrum, a mechanical sound that vibrated through the floor. It sounded nothing like a sob. Next, I went to the laundry area. I ran the washing machine on a spin cycle. The unbalanced drum banged rhythmically against the side. Thud, 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 too heavy, too consistent. I went upstairs and turned on the furnace fan at the thermostat, forcing air through the ducts. I stood in my bedroom, right where I had been the night before. The vents exhaled a steady, white noise whoosh. It was continuous. The sound I had heard was organic. It had pauses. It had the jagged, uneven rhythm of someone trying to catch their breath. I even went outside and ran the garden hose against the siding near the vent, wondering if a drip could mimic a cry. The water drummed against the vinyl. It sounded like rain. By noon, I was exhausted and frustrated. I had tested every mechanical system in the house, and not a single one produced anything resembling the soft, hitched sobbing or the muffled vibration I had felt in the floorboards. The house was innocent, which meant the sound had come from something else. I needed to talk to Evan again. I knew Rourke Yard and Snow usually did the neighborhood in a cluster. I drove slowly down the street, scanning the driveways. I found his truck 3 blocks over, parked in front of the Miller residence. Evan was blowing grass clippings off the sidewalk. I pulled my car to the curb and got out. Evan saw me and turned off the blower. He took off his ear protection, his expression wary. He looked like he was already regretting saying anything to me. "Ms. Henderson," he said, nodding politely. "Evan, I need to ask you something else," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "About what you heard yesterday." He shifted his weight, looking down at his boots. "Look, I probably shouldn't have said anything. I don't want to cause trouble." "You are not causing trouble," I assured him. "But I need to know exactly what you heard. You said it sounded like someone trying not to be loud. Was it a child? A woman?" Evan looked up, squinting against the sun. He hesitated, chewing on his lower lip. "It was high-pitched. Could have been a kid. Could have been a woman. But that wasn't the part that made me call you." "What do you mean?" "I didn't tell you the whole thing yesterday," he admitted, "because people laugh at stuff like that. They think you are hearing ghosts or making it up. I am not laughing, Evan." He took a breath. "Okay. So, I heard the crying. That stopped when the lock clinked, like I told you. But I stood there for another minute, just listening. I was about to start the weed whacker again, and I heard a second sound." "What sound?" I felt a cold prickle on my arms despite the heat. "A voice," Evan said softly. "A man's voice. It was deep. It came from right behind the bulkhead doors. Like he was standing on the steps inside. He just whispered one thing." Evan leaned in slightly, his eyes wide. He whispered, "Shh." The air left my lungs. "It was sharp," Evan continued, "like a command. Shh. And then absolute silence. That is when I walked away and called you. Because that wasn't a ghost. Ms. Henderson, ghosts don't tell people to shut up." I stared at him, the suburban street around us fading into a blur of green lawns and blue sky. A man whispering to the source of the crying. "Thank you, Evan," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "You did the right thing." I got back in my car, but I didn't start the engine immediately. I gripped the steering wheel. This changed the calculus. If Evan was right, this wasn't just a squatter. A squatter would flee if they heard a landscaper right outside the door. They wouldn't stand there and silence a companion. That implied control. That implied captivity. But my basement was empty. I had looked. The police officer had looked. Unless they weren't there then, unless they were moving in and out, I drove home with a new, grim determination. I was not going to be a victim in my own house. I was not going to be the crazy woman on the block. I was going to catch them. I spent the afternoon turning my home into a fortress. I went to the hardware store and bought 2 high-definition battery-operated security cameras. I didn't want anything that required wiring. I wanted them up now. I mounted the first one in the basement, hidden on top of the furnace ductwork, facing the interior wooden stairs. If anyone came down from the house, I would see them. I mounted the second one inside the basement as well, but this one I angled specifically at the bulkhead doors. I used a strong magnetic mount to stick it to a steel support beam in the ceiling, where it was shrouded in shadows. If those doors opened, or if anyone stood on those steps, the camera would trigger. I connected them to an app on my phone. The live feed was crisp, showing the dusty gray stillness of the basement in high resolution. Next, I went to the back door. It had a keypad lock I had installed years ago for dog walkers. I deleted every code. I deleted my ex-husband's code. I deleted the code I gave to my cleaning lady. I created a new, random 6-digit code that only I knew. Finally, I sat down at the kitchen table and texted Tessa. Tessa Lowell was my best friend, a no-nonsense paralegal who lived 20 minutes away. Alice. Hey, weird situation at the house. Might be nothing, but if I call you in the middle of the night, please pick up. I might need a place to crash. Tessa. Everything okay? Is it David again? Alice. No, not David. Just house noises. Spooked myself. Just wanted a backup plan. Tessa. My guest room is always yours, but call me if you want me to come over and beat up a ghost with a baseball bat. I put the phone down. I felt a little better. I had eyes on the basement. I had a secure perimeter. I had an escape route. The sun began to set, casting long orange rectangles across the living room floor. I was in the kitchen making a salad I had no appetite for when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a tentative ring. It was a firm, 2-note chime. I checked the peephole. A man was standing on my porch. He was wearing a beige polo shirt and khakis. With a lanyard hanging around his neck, he held a clipboard. He looked aggressively nondescript. I opened the door, but I kept the storm door locked. Can I help you? I asked through the glass. The man smiled. It was a practice smile, designed to disarm. Good evening. Ma'am, my name is Cal Dunning. I am with Hearthstone Community Services. He lifted the badge on his lanyard. It had his photo and a vague blue logo that looked like a pair of hands cradling a roof. I am not interested in soliciting, I said. Oh, I am not selling anything, Cal said quickly. His voice was smooth, like polished stone. We are a non-profit partner with the county. We actually received an anonymous report regarding this address. I froze. A report? What kind of report? Cal glanced at his clipboard. Well, it is a wellness check of sorts. We received a concern about potential unsafe conditions in the home, structural issues, mostly, but given the nature of the report, we are offering a voluntary inspection to help homeowners avoid fines or deeper involvement from the authorities. Unsafe conditions? I repeated. My house is fine. I am sure it is, Cal said soothingly. These reports are often misunderstandings. But the caller was quite specific. They mentioned hearing structural groaning and... He paused, looking me in the eye with a gaze that felt too direct. And a child crying at night, consistently. We just want to make sure everyone is safe and the home is habitable. My heart stopped. A child crying at night. Sophie was in Lake Briar. She had been gone for days. My daughter is not home, I said, my voice sharp. She is with her father, so if anyone heard a child, they are hearing things. Cal didn't blink. He didn't look surprised that I had a daughter. He just nodded slowly. I see. Well, that is good to know. But sometimes, noises travel. Or sometimes, he trailed off, tilting his head. Sometimes things happen in older homes that we aren't aware of. If you would just let me do a quick walkthrough, primarily of the basement and foundation. I can clear this report right now. It would save you a lot of paperwork later. He wanted in the basement. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Evan heard crying from the basement. This man, claiming to be from a community service, shows up citing a report about crying, and his solution is to get access to the basement. No, I said. I am not letting you in. Cal's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened slightly. Ms. Henderson. It is Ms. Henderson, right? I understand your hesitation, but if we can't clear this voluntarily, the county sometimes escalates these things. We just want to help. If the county wants to inspect my house, they can send an official inspector with a warrant or a scheduled appointment, I said. Please leave my property. Of course, Cal said. He stepped back, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. We certainly don't want to frighten you. I will just note that you refuse the voluntary assistance. He turned and walked down the steps. I watched him go. He walked to a gray sedan parked on the street. He didn't get in immediately. He stood by the driver's door and looked back at the house. He looked at the second-floor windows. Then he looked at the basement window well. Then he got in and drove away. I locked the main door and leaned against it, trembling. He had used the crying as leverage. He knew about the crying. How did he know? Did Evan tell someone? Or was Cal part of whatever was making the noise? He had mentioned a child. He was trying to trigger a maternal panic response. Let me in. I am here to help the child. But I knew Sophie was safe. That knowledge was my only shield. If Sophie had been home, God, if Sophie had been home, I might have let him in just to prove she was okay. They were banking on fear. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept my phone on my pillow. The camera app open. I watched the black and white feed of the basement. Nothing moved, just dust and silence. The next morning, the assault on my reality shifted from the physical to the bureaucratic. I went to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. Amidst the flyers and bills, there was a white envelope. It had no return address, just a stamp that said, Urgent, Official Correspondence. I tore it open in the kitchen. It was a letter on thick, cream-colored paper. The letterhead read, Maple Hollow Housing Review Board. Dear Resident, Notice of Compliance Recheck, Case 8922-B. This letter serves as formal notification that your property at 412 Cedar Lane has been flagged for a secondary compliance review regarding reported noise ordinances and unauthorized occupancy standards. A mandatory inspection is required within 48 hours to assess the validity of recent complaints. Failure to comply may result in fines of up to $5,000 or temporary condemnation of the structure. Please contact our scheduling office immediately. It looked terrifying. The language was legalistic and cold. The threat of a $5,000 fine made my stomach clench. But as I read it a second time, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by suspicion. I looked at the header, Maple Hollow Housing Review Board. The word review was in a slightly different font than the rest. Times New Roman versus Arial. It was subtle, but it was there. I looked at the spacing. The bottom margin was uneven, and the phone number listed was not the town hall switchboard. It was an 800 number. I grabbed my keys and the letter. I was going to get answers. The Maple Hollow Town Hall was a brick building in the center of town, smelling of floor wax and old coffee. I marched up to the clerk's window. The woman behind the glass, Mrs. Gable, had been there since I was in high school. Alice, she said, peering over her reading glasses, what brings you in? Dog license renewal? No, I said, sliding the letter under the glass. I got this today. I need to know what is going on. Who is the Housing Review Board? Mrs. Gable picked up the letter. She read it. Her eyebrows furrowed. She rubbed the paper between her thumb and finger. We don't have a housing review board. Alice, she said, we have a zoning commission and a building department, but no review board. It says I am facing a $5,000 fine, I said. Mrs. Gable shook her head. She handed the letter back to me. This isn't from us. Look at the seal. The eagle is facing the wrong way. Our town seal has the eagle facing left. I looked. She was right. It is a fake? I asked. It is a scam, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. As if the walls had ears. We have been seeing more of these lately. Usually, they target the elderly. They send a scary letter. get you to call the number, and then tell you that you can pay a settlement fee over the phone to avoid the inspection, or they use it to get your social security number. But this one isn't asking for money, I said. It is asking for an inspection. It is trying to get someone into my house, Mrs. Gable frowned. That is unusual. Usually, they just want cash. Mrs. Gable, I said, leaning closer. A man came to my house yesterday from Hearthstone Community Services. Is that real? Hearthstone? She thought for a moment. I think there used to be a Hearthstone charity years ago. A soup kitchen? But they lost their funding. Alice, are you okay? I don't know, I admitted. It feels like I'm being targeted. Mrs. Gable sighed. She looked tired. People get embarrassed. Alice, they get these letters. They get scared. They pay the money. And then they realize they were tricked. And they never report it because they feel stupid. If someone is bothering you, you should call the police. I did, I said. They told me I have a drafty house. Well, she said, turning back to her computer. Just throw the letter away. It is trash. Don't call the number. I walked out of town hall with the letter clutched in my hand. It was trash. It was a fake. But the effort behind it wasn't trash. Someone had drafted this. Someone had printed it, put it in an envelope, and mailed it to me. They were trying to box me in. The house is unsafe. The authorities are watching. You are in trouble. They wanted me to feel like the walls were closing in. So I would open the door to let them help. I drove home, my anger simmering into a cold, hard resolve. When I got out of the car, I walked around to the backyard. I wanted to check the bulkhead. I wanted to see my chain, my lock, my proof that I was in control. I walked through the grass. The green steel doors were shut. The chain was there, wrapped tight around the handles. The shiny new padlock I had bought yesterday glinted in the sun. I knelt down to inspect it. My breath hitched. The keyhole of the padlock was silver, but around the slit where the key went in, there were scratches. Fresh, bright scratches in the metal. Someone had tried to pick it. I ran my thumb over the jagged marks. They weren't random. Someone had inserted a tool and tried to torque the cylinder. They had failed. It was a high-security lock. But they had tried. This wasn't a scam letter. This wasn't a phone call. This was a person, standing in my backyard, likely last night while I slept, trying to breach my basement. I felt violated. It was a physical sensation, like a layer of skin had been peeled off. I stood up and scanned the tree line at the edge of my property. Was someone watching now? Were they in the woods? I went inside and locked the door. I put the security bar under the handle. I checked the camera feed. The basement was empty. The day dragged on. I couldn't work. I couldn't eat. I paced the house, holding the fake letter in one hand and my phone in the other. I felt like a rat in a maze, bumping against electric fences. Night fell. The darkness felt different tonight. It felt hostile. The house, which had always been my sanctuary, felt like a cage I was sharing with something invisible. I sat in the living room with the lights off, the glow of the street lamp outside casting stripes across the rug. I had the camera app open on my iPad, propped up on the coffee table. 1 a.m. passed. 2 a.m. passed. I was dozing off, my head lolling against the back of the couch, when a soft ping from the iPad jerked me awake. Motion detected. Basement bulkhead. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. I grabbed the iPad. I stared at the screen. The image was grainy in the night vision mode. Everything rendered in shades of green and gray. The bulkhead doors were closed. The stairs were empty. But then, I saw it, at the very bottom of the frame. Near the floor where the concrete met the wall, there was a flicker. It wasn't a flashlight beam. It was softer, a blue-white glow. It flared up for a second, illuminating a patch of the wall. And in that brief flash, I saw shadows shift. Long, distorted shadows that shouldn't have been there. Then, the light vanished. It looked exactly like someone had turned on a cell phone screen to check a message and then immediately covered it. I zoomed in on the frozen frame. The light source was inside the basement, but the doors were locked from the outside. The interior door was locked and barricaded by me. How? How were they getting in? I stared at the timestamp. 2:17 a.m. I put my hand on the phone to call the police. My thumb hovered over the dial button. I imagined Officer Miller, drafty house, stress, animals in the vents. If I called them now, they would come. They would find the doors locked. They would find the basement empty. They would see a grainy flicker on a video that could be a reflection, or a glitch, or a firefly. And they would write me off completely. The divorcee is hallucinating. And if the police left again, finding nothing, whoever was down there would know. They would know the police wouldn't help me. They would know I was defenseless. I didn't call. Instead, I walked to the kitchen block. I pulled out the largest chef's knife I owned. The handle felt cold and heavy in my palm. I hated holding it. I hated that my life had reduced to this, standing in my pajamas in the dark, clutching a weapon. I went back to the living room. I sat on the couch, facing the hallway that led to the basement door. I didn't go down there. I wasn't stupid. If someone was in there, they had the advantage of the dark and the terrain. But if they tried to come up, if they tried to breach the door I had barricaded, I would be ready. I watched the iPad. The basement remained dark. The flicker didn't return. As I sat there in the silence, a terrifying clarity began to wash over me. The letter, the visit from Cal, the scratches on the lock, the crying, the flicker of light. If they wanted to rob me, they would have done it. If they wanted to hurt me, they could have broken a window. They weren't doing either. They were poking me. They were stimulating the environment and watching the response. Make a sound. Does she call the police? Send a letter. Does she go to town hall? Scratch the lock. Does she notice? I wasn't just a victim. I was a test subject. And the real terror wasn't the monster in the basement. It was the realization that someone, somewhere, was charting my fear on a graph, seeing how much pressure it would take before I broke. I tightened my grip on the knife. I am not going to break. I whispered to the empty room. I stayed awake until dawn. Nolan Pike was a man who spoke the language of brass and steel better than he spoke English. He was 60 years old, with hands that looked like they had been carved out of oak, and he had been the only locksmith in Maple Hollow for 3 decades. I had called him at 8 in the morning, desperate for someone who understood the mechanics of security to validate the nightmare I was living. By 9 o'clock, Nolan was kneeling on the concrete pad outside my bulkhead doors, peering at the padlock hasp through a pair of thick bifocals. "You were right about the scratches, Alice," Nolan said. He didn't look up. He ran a rough thumb over the metal. "Someone took a tension wrench to this. Looks like an amateur job. Or maybe they were in a hurry. They didn't get in this way." "I knew it," I said, hugging my arms across my chest. The morning air was cool, but I was sweating. I knew I wasn't imagining it. Nolan stood up, his knees popping audibly. "But that is not what worries me." "What do you mean?" He gestured for me to follow him. We walked around the side of the house to the back door, the one off the kitchen. It was a solid wood door with a deadbolt and a keypad handle I had just reprogrammed. Nolan opened the door and pointed to the door frame, specifically at the metal plate where the bolt slid in. "The strike plate," he said. "What about it?" "Look at the screws." I leaned in. The screws were shiny, silver. They looked brand new against the weathered paint of the frame. "I didn't change those," I said. "I know you didn't," Nolan said grimly. "These are 3/4-inch screws. The standard for a security door is 3 inches. 3-inch screws go deep into the stud of the house frame. These short ones? They just grip the trim." He looked at me, his eyes grave. "Someone swapped them out. Alice, they took out the long anchor screws and put in these cosmetic ones. It looks locked. It feels locked. But one solid kick to this door, and the whole frame will splinter like balsa wood. This isn't a break-in attempt. This is preparation." My stomach dropped. "Preparation for what?" "For a quick entry," Nolan said. "Someone wants to be able to get into this house fast. without tools. Whenever they decide it is time, I felt the blood drain from my face. Can you fix it? I am going to put 4-inch screws in every strike plate you have, Nolan said, already reaching for his drill. And I am adding a reinforcement sleeve. Nobody is kicking this door in unless they bring a battering ram. I watched him work, the whine of the drill tearing through the morning silence. It was a comforting sound, but the implications were terrifying. Someone had stood here, likely in broad daylight or deep night, and methodically weakened my home's defenses. They weren't just watching, they were engineering a vulnerability. By the time Nolan left, I felt physically sick. I needed an anchor. I needed someone who could look at this and tell me I wasn't losing my mind, but also help me figure out the logic of it. I texted Tessa again. Come over, please, now. Tessa Lowell arrived 20 minutes later, looking like a whirlwind of practicality in a tailored blazer. She carried 2 large coffees and an expression of fierce concern. Okay, she said, stepping into the kitchen and locking the door behind her with emphatic force. I am here. You look like you haven't slept in 3 days. Tell me everything. We sat at the kitchen island. I told her about Evan, about the wet footprint, about Cal Dunning and the fake inspection, about the letter from the non-existent housing board, and finally, about the screws Nolan had just replaced. Tessa listened, her face shifting from skepticism to alarm. She was a paralegal, trained to look for evidence, for facts. The screws are the clincher, she said finally. Paranoia doesn't unscrew 3-inch steel anchors and replace them. That is physical tampering. But Alice, why? Why go to all this trouble? If they want to rob you, they break a window. This feels elaborately theatrical. I think they are messing with me, I said. I think they are testing me. Show me the footage, Tessa commanded. The thing from last night. I pulled up the iPad. I navigated to the clip from 2:17 in the morning. We watched the grainy black and white silence of the basement. Watch the bottom left, I said. We waited. The seconds ticked by. Then, the flicker, the soft, blue-white glow that washed over the concrete wall for a split second, revealing the distorted shadows of the shelving unit. That is a light, Tessa said, leaning in. That is definitely a light source from inside the room. Wait, I said. Turn the volume all the way up. Tessa tapped the screen. We leaned our heads together over the iPad. The audio was mostly white noise, the hum of the house, but right after the light flickered, there was a sound. Uh-huh-huh. Did you hear that? I whispered. Rewind it, Tessa said. Her voice was sharp. We played it again. Flicker, uh-huh-huh, click. Tessa straightened up, her eyes wide. That sounded like a whimper. But Alice, did you hear the end? The click? It sounded like a button being pressed, Tessa said. Like a recording being paused. And the inhale, it was too clean. There was no echo. If someone was crying in that basement, the sound would bounce off the concrete walls. It would be muddy. That sound? It was dry. It sounded like it was being played through a speaker right next to the microphone. I stared at her. You think it is a recording? I think someone is down there, Tessa said slowly. But I don't think anyone is actually crying. I think they are playing a track. They are broadcasting misery into your house. The cruelty of it took my breath away. To synthesize the sound of human suffering, the sound of a child or a woman in pain, just to terrify the person living upstairs? It was sadistic. We need to call the police again, Tessa said. And tell them what? I asked, my voice rising. That I have a recording of a recording? That my screws were short? Officer Miller already thinks I am a hysterical divorcee. If I call them now, they will just take a report and file it. I need more. Tessa, I need to know who is doing this. Tessa looked out the window toward the neighbor's house. Speaking of people watching, don't look now, but your neighbor Marjorie is on her porch again. I stood up and walked to the sink. Glancing casually through the blinds, Marjorie Sloane was there, standing behind her hanging fern, looking directly at my kitchen window. She wasn't reading. She wasn't gardening. She was watching. I decided to test her. I raised my hand and gave a big, cheerful wave. Marjorie jolted. She turned away instantly, pretending to examine a dead leaf on her plant, and then hurriedly went inside her house. "She is involved," I said. "She has to be. She told me not to make a scene. She told me to keep the police away." "Maybe she's just a nosy neighbor," Tessa said, though she didn't sound convinced. "But Alice, you need to check your exposure if they are tampering with the house. They might be tampering with other things. Have you checked your accounts?" "My bank accounts?" "Identity theft often starts with physical theft," Tessa said. "Check everything." I opened my laptop on the island. My hands were shaking as I logged into my bank portal. I scanned the recent transactions on my checking account: grocery store, gas station, automatic payment for the electric bill. Then I saw it. It was in the pending transactions section, flagged in yellow: POS, pre-Ayuth, Crestmore title, and escrow, $0. "What is Crestmore title and escrow?" I asked. Tessa looked over my shoulder. "Title companies handle real estate closings. Why are they running a pre-authorization on your checking account?" "I am not buying a house. I am not selling a house." I clicked on the details. The transaction attempt was dated yesterday. The notes field, which usually contained a merchant ID, had a string of characters that looked like a file reference number. "Call the bank," Tessa said. "Right now." I drove to the bank branch 20 minutes later, leaving Tessa at the house to watch the monitors. I needed to talk to a human being, the branch manager, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, who had helped me set up my accounts after the divorce. Ushered me into her glass-walled office. She looked concerned as she pulled up my file. "I saw the flag this morning." "Alice," Sarah said. "I was actually about to call you. We blocked the transaction." "Who are they?" I asked. "Who is Crestmore?" "It is a valid merchant ID for a settlement agency," Sarah said, tapping her keyboard. "But here's the disturbing part. They didn't just try to run a charge. They tried to initiate a verification for a property-related disbursement. Essentially, they were trying to confirm that this account was valid and active so they could wire funds out related to a lien settlement." "A lien?" I felt dizzy. "I don't have any liens." "I know," Sarah said gently, "but the request came through with accurate data. They had your full name, your current address, your social security number." "Alice." The room seemed to tilt. "They have my social?" "They had everything," Sarah said. "The only reason the system rejected it was the verbal security phrase. We have that extra layer on your account for wire transfers. The request came with the phrase, Bluebird. Your phrase is Sophie. When it didn't match, the system locked it down." "Bluebird," I repeated. I had never used that word. "Someone is trying to verify your identity to move money tied to your home equity," Sarah explained. "It looks like they are setting up a fraudulent title transfer or a loan against your deed. We have frozen the account. But Alice, if they have your social and your mortgage details, you have a major breach." I walked out of the bank into the bright, blinding sunshine of the parking lot. I felt exposed, naked. Someone wasn't just haunting my basement. They were stealing my life. They were trying to liquidate the roof over my head. I drove home with a lead foot. When I burst into the house, Tessa was standing in the living room, holding a baseball bat she must have found in the closet. "Jesus, Alice," she said, lowering the bat. "You scared me. What did they say?" "They have my social," I said, dropping my purse on the floor. "They tried to verify a wire transfer. I need to check my files." I ran to the home office. I had a 2-drawer filing cabinet where I kept all the important paperwork: birth certificates, the divorce decree, the mortgage deed. I yanked the bottom drawer open. The hanging folders were green. I kept them alphabetized: auto, insurance, medical, mortgage. I reached for the M section. The mortgage folder was there, but it was sitting in front of medical, not behind it. I pulled it out. My hands were trembling so hard the papers rattled. I opened the folder. The documents inside were usually clipped in chronological order: original deed, refinancing paperwork, Tax assessments. They were a mess. The tax assessment was on top. The deed was in the middle, folded at the corner as if someone had shoved it back in hastily. I flipped through them frantically. I kept a photocopy of my driver's license and passport in the back of this folder, in a clear plastic sleeve. Just in case of a fire, the plastic sleeve was empty. "They took it," I whispered. Tessa appeared in the doorway. "What did they take?" "A copy of my license," I said, holding up the empty sleeve. "They have been in here, inside the house, in this room." I looked around the office. It looked normal. The books were on the shelves. The rug was vacuumed. But suddenly, the room felt violated. Someone had stood here, flipped through my life, and taken the pieces they needed to construct a new one. "When?" Tessa asked. "You have been here." "I was gone for an hour yesterday to go to town hall," I said. "I was gone to pick up groceries on Monday. They have a key." "Tessa, remember? They swapped my key." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I jumped. It was Evan. I answered, putting it on speaker so Tessa could hear. "Evan?" "Ms. Henderson," Evan said. He sounded breathless again. "Look, I am sorry to bother you. I know I am just the lawn guy, but I'm working down the street at the plot on the corner, and I saw something." "What did you see?" "A car," Evan said. "It was parked on the side street that runs behind your backyard. About 20 minutes ago, it was an older gray sedan, looked like a Ford Taurus maybe. But here's the thing. It didn't have a front license plate. In Pennsylvania, you don't need one. But there were holes where one used to be." "A gray sedan," I said. Cal Dunning had driven a gray sedan. "It was idling," Evan said. "Just sitting there, lights off, but I saw a guy in the front seat. He was watching your house through a pair of binoculars." "Binoculars?" "Yeah. As soon as I turned my mower toward him, he took off. Burned rubber. I got a bad feeling. Ms. Henderson, like he was waiting for you to leave." "Thank you, Evan," I said. "You have no idea how helpful you are being." I hung up. I looked at Tessa. "They are watching to see when I leave," I said. "They want to come back in, probably to finish what they started with the files, or to plant something else." Tessa's face hardened. "So we call the police now. We have the car description. A gray sedan with no plates?" I shook my head. "It is a ghost car. They will never find it. And if they do, the guy will just say he was a private investigator or something. No." I felt a shift inside me. The fear, which had been a hot, chaotic buzzing in my head for 48 hours, began to cool into something solid, something sharp like ice. They were watching me. They were studying my patterns. They were manipulating my environment to see how I reacted. Well, two could play that game. "I am going to bait them," I said. "What?" Tessa asked. "They are looking for financial documents," I said. "They want money. They tried to drain the equity. Let's give them something they can't resist." I went to the desk and grabbed a large manila envelope. I took a thick Sharpie and wrote in bold, black letters on the front, "State Farm, Insurance Settlement, Final Disbursement." "You are going to fake a settlement check?" Tessa asked, catching on. "I am going to fill this with junk mail," I said, stuffing the envelope with old flyers and a stack of blank paper to give it weight. "And I am going to leave it right here, on the kitchen counter, visible from the window. And then?" "And then we leave," I said. "We make a show of it. We leave the house empty, but we leave eyes inside." I went to the bookshelf in the kitchen. I had a small, decorative birdhouse sitting on the top shelf. I took the second security camera, the one I hadn't mounted yet, and nestled it inside the birdhouse. Pointing the lens directly at the kitchen counter, it was invisible unless you knew where to look. "This feeds to the cloud," I said. "If they come in, we will see their face." We set the stage. I put the envelope on the counter, next to the mail stack. I left the drawer of the filing cabinet slightly ajar, as if I had been careless. Then, Tessa and I walked out the front door. We got into our separate cars. I made a point of looking distracted. Fumbling with my keys, I drove around the block and parked in Tessa's driveway, 4 streets over. We sat in her living room, staring at my phone. We waited. 30 minutes passed. 45. Maybe they are not coming, Tessa said. They are coming, I said. They are greedy. At 52 minutes, the motion alert chimed. Motion detected. Kitchen. I tapped the notification. The video feed loaded. Someone was in my kitchen. He was dressed in dark mechanic's coveralls. He wore gloves, and he wore a face mask. Not a ski mask, but a medical mask and a baseball cap pulled low. I couldn't see his features, but I could see his confidence. He didn't sneak. He walked with purpose. He went straight to the counter. He picked up the manila envelope labeled Insurance Settlement. My heart hammered. Take it so I can nail you for theft. He held it. He weighed it in his hand. Then, he did something that made my blood run cold. He laughed. It was muffled by the mask, but I heard it, a dry, dismissive chuckle. He put the envelope back down. He didn't take it. Instead, he pulled a small digital camera from his pocket. He picked up the stack of legitimate mail sitting next to the decoy, my electric bill, a bank statement, a letter from the school district. He laid them out on the counter. Click, click, click. He photographed every single return address and account number. Then, he walked over to the junk drawer, the one where I kept scissors and tape. He opened it. He rummaged around. He didn't take anything. He just moved things. He took the scissors and placed them on the counter, pointed toward the hallway. Then he went to the cabinet under the sink. He opened it and left the doors wide open. He walked back to the center of the room. He looked directly at the birdhouse. For a second, I thought he saw the camera, but he didn't reach for it. He just stared at the spot, as if he sensed he was being watched, and gave a little mock salute. Then he walked out the back door. He didn't take the bait, Tessa whispered. He knew. He didn't just know, I said, staring at the frozen image of the open cabinet doors and the scissors. He is playing with me. He left the doors open. He moved the scissors. He wants me to come home and find things wrong. He wants me to know he was there, but he didn't take anything I can prove. If he had taken the envelope, it would be burglary. By photographing the mail and rearranging the furniture, it was, what, mischief? A gray area? He was careful. He was incredibly careful. I drove back to the house alone. Tessa wanted to stay, wanted to call the police right then, but I told her no, not yet. The police would see a woman who staged a trap that failed. They would see moved scissors and call it clumsy housekeeping. I needed the kill shot. I needed undeniable proof. I walked into my kitchen. The air felt heavy, tainted by his presence. I looked at the scissors on the counter. The blades were open. It was a threat. I can cut you. I looked at the insurance envelope. It was right where I left it, mocking me. I closed the cabinet doors. I put the scissors away. I wasn't shaking anymore. Fear is a hot emotion. It burns you out. It makes you frantic. But what I felt now was cold. It was the absolute zero of a mother who realizes her nest is being hunted. They thought I was a victim. They thought I was a sensitive suburban woman who would crumble under the pressure of ghost noises and gaslighting. They thought they could drive me out or drive me crazy and take the equity in the chaos. They were wrong. I sat down at the kitchen island and pulled the insurance envelope toward me. I ripped it open. I took a piece of the blank paper from inside. I uncapped a pen. I started making a list. 1. Gray sedan, Evan. 2. Crestmore title, bank. 3. Hearthstone/Cal Dunning. 4. Marjorie's involvement. 5. The recording. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to run to a hotel. I was going to stay right here. I was going to figure out how they were getting in, really getting in, and I was going to be waiting. They wanted to study me? Fine. I was going to study them back. And when I learned the lesson, I was going to fail them, permanently. The fluorescent lights of the Maple Hollow Police Department hummed with a frequency that seemed to vibrate directly against my skull. I sat at a metal table in a small interview room, my hands clasped tightly around my phone. Across from me sat Detective Renee Calder. She was a stark contrast to Officer Miller, the man who had dismissed me as a hysterical woman with a drafty house 2 days prior. Calder was sharp-featured, with eyes that moved like aperture shutters, snapping up details and storing them away. I had shown her the footage from the birdhouse camera. The man in the mask, the rearranged kitchen, the photographs of my mail. Calder did not dismiss me. She watched the video 3 times. "He is careful," Calder said, leaning back in her chair. She tapped the screen with a pen. "Look at how he moves. He keeps his chin tucked. He knows the hat brim blocks the overhead angle. And see here? When he walks past the hallway entrance?" I looked. "He stays to the left. He hugs the wall," Calder corrected. "He knows exactly where the sight lines are. You said you have a camera in the basement?" "Yes." "And one on the back door?" "Yes." "He avoided all of them," Calder said. "He entered through a blind spot we haven't found yet, and he moved through your house knowing exactly where not to look. This isn't an opportunist. Ms. Henderson, this is someone who has cased the interior of your home." The validation was a relief, but it was a cold, heavy kind of relief. It meant I wasn't crazy, but it also meant I was in deeper trouble than I had imagined. "So what do we do?" I asked. "Can you find him?" "We can pull prints from the drawer he touched, but with those gloves, it is unlikely we will get anything usable," Calder said. "We can put out a bolo for the gray sedan, but without a plate, it is a needle in a haystack. Honestly, my advice is to leave." I stiffened. "Leave my house?" "Pack a bag," Calder said, her voice dropping to a serious, almost maternal register. "Go stay with your parents. Go to a hotel. This individual has demonstrated access and intent. He is escalating, first noises, then tampering, now entry. You are not safe there alone." "If I leave," I said, my voice trembling but firm, "then I am telling them they won't meet resistance. I am telling them the house is theirs. It is a house. Alice, it is wood and brick. It is not worth your life. It is not just a house," I insisted. "It is my life. It is my equity. It is where my daughter lives. If I run away now, I am proving that I am powerless. I am proving that all they have to do is scare me and I will hand over the keys. I can't do that. I won't," Calder sighed, rubbing her temple. "I can't force you to go, but I will have a patrol car do extra rounds tonight, and I want you to keep recording. If he comes back, do not engage, barricade yourself, and call 911 immediately." I left the station feeling a strange mixture of fear and adrenaline. I wasn't going to run. I was going to fight. I returned home around noon. The house felt different now. It didn't feel like a sanctuary. It felt like a battlefield where the enemy had already dug trenches. I was in the kitchen, brewing coffee I didn't need. When the doorbell rang, I froze. I checked the monitor. It was Cal Dunning, the man from Hearthstone Community Services. But this time, he wasn't alone. Standing next to him was a woman with severe glasses and a clipboard, wearing a matching blue lanyard. I took a deep breath. I unlocked the main door but kept the storm door locked. "Mr. Dunning," I said through the glass. "I thought I told you I wasn't interested." "Ms. Henderson, please," Cal said. His voice was dripping with manufactured concern. "I know we got off on the wrong foot. I wanted to introduce my supervisor, Kara Venn. We just want to clear up the confusion regarding the report." Kara Venn stepped forward. She offered a tight, sympathetic smile. "Alice, is it okay if I call you Alice? Cal told me you were understandably defensive the other day. We see that a lot. Single mothers carrying the weight of the world. It is exhausting, isn't it?" Her tone was perfectly calibrated to sound supportive, but it made my skin crawl. She was weaponizing empathy. "What do you want?" I asked. "We reviewed the file," Kara said. "The report about the crying? It is flagged as a priority 2 distress indicator. Now, usually, that triggers a formal county investigation. Child Protective Services gets involved. It becomes a whole legal mess." She paused, letting the threat of CPS hang in the air like a guillotine. "But," she continued, Hearthstone has a diversion program. We can offer you an emergency stabilization grant. Essentially, we certify that the home is undergoing repairs for the noise issues, the structural groaning, and we provide funds to help you manage the property upkeep. It makes the official report go away. A grant? I asked, feigning ignorance. You want to give me money? We want to help you stabilize your situation, Cal added, nodding earnestly. So you don't have to worry about the county looking over your shoulder. Kara slid a piece of paper out from her clipboard. All we need is a signature on this consent form. It authorizes us to advocate on your behalf and access the necessary property records to process the grant. It is standard procedure. She held the paper up to the glass. I looked at it. The header read, Hearthstone Community Assistance, Beneficiary Authorization. I squinted at the fine print in the middle of the page. The undersigned hereby grants Hearthstone Services and its affiliates full power of attorney regarding property encumbrances, lien settlements, and financial disclosures related to the address listed above. It wasn't a grant application, it was a limited power of attorney. If I signed this, I would be giving them legal permission to talk to my bank, to negotiate with title companies, maybe even to agree to liens on my behalf. I looked up at Kara. Her eyes were expectant behind the glasses. She looked like a predator waiting for the trap to snap shut. I need to read it over, I said. I never sign anything without my lawyer seeing it. Kara's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Of course, but the funding cycle closes tomorrow at 5 o'clock. We really need to expedite this to stop the county investigation. I will let you know, I said. I closed the door in their faces. I watched them walk back to the gray sedan, the same sedan Evan had seen. They argued briefly in the front seat before driving away. I went straight to my phone. I dialed the number for the County Department of Human Services. I navigated the phone tree until I got a real person. This is Investigator Clark, a weary voice answered. Hi, my name is Alice Henderson. I am calling to verify a program. Does the county partner with a nonprofit called Hearthstone Community Services for Emergency Home Repair Grants? There was a pause, the sound of typing. Hearthstone? Clark asked. No, ma'am. We have no vendors by that name. We handle all our grants internally. They said they could stop a CPS investigation regarding a noise complaint. Ma'am, Clark said, his voice sharpening. That is a scam. We have had 3 calls about this in the last month. They target single parents. They imply there is a report about child neglect or unsafe housing to panic you. Then they get you to sign over financial access under the guise of assistance. Do not sign anything. Do not let them in. I didn't, I said. Thank you. I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. They were using the threat of taking my child, or the threat of me being seen as an unfit mother, to steal my equity. I needed to understand the mechanics of it. I needed to know exactly what they were trying to do with my title. I called Mira Halstead. Mira was a real estate attorney who had handled my closing 5 years ago. She was expensive, intimidating, and brilliant. I sat in her office an hour later. The fake letter and my notes spread out on her mahogany desk. Mira listened without interrupting. She read the Hearthstone document I had photographed through the glass. She looked at the bank alert about Crestmore Title. It is a clouded title scheme, Mira said, leaning back and taking off her reading glasses. It is sophisticated, Alice. I will give them that. What does that mean? They don't want to steal your house in the sense of moving in, Mira explained. They want to extract the value. Here is the play. They file fraudulent documents at the county recorder's office, a notice of interest, or a fake contractor's lien. They claim you owe them money, or that they have a stake in the property. She tapped the Crestmore bank alert. Then, they create a crisis. They make you feel unsafe. They make you think the house is falling apart, or that you are under investigation. They pressure you to settle the issue, or they use that power of attorney you almost signed to acknowledge the fake debt. Once the debt is acknowledged, they can foreclose on it, or they can force you to pay them a massive settlement just to clear the title so you can refinance or sell. But I am not selling, I said. They don't care, Mira said. If they slap $100,000 lien on your house and then threaten to drag you into court, many people just pay a settlement to make it go away, especially if they are being gaslit into thinking they are crazy. Mira turned to her computer. Let's look at the public records. If they are moving this fast, they have probably already filed something. She logged into the county clerk's database. She typed in my address. She frowned. Here it is, she said softly. What? 2 weeks ago, just before your daughter left, Mira turned the screen so I could see. There was a new entry on the list of documents recorded against my deed. Document type: Memorandum of Option, Grantor, Alice Henderson. Alleged, Grantee, Northbridge Holdings, LLC. What is a Memorandum of Option? I asked. It is a document that says you have agreed to sell the property to them at a future date, or that they have an exclusive right to buy it, Mira said. It clouds the title. No bank will touch you with this on your record. And look at the date. They filed this the day before your lawn guy heard the crying. I never signed that, I said. I know, Mira said. It is a forgery, but until we prove that in court, it is a legal cloud over your home. Northbridge Holdings is likely a shell company. Crestmore Title is the fake escrow agent. I stared at the screen. Northbridge Holdings, LLC. It sounded so corporate, so legitimate. So the crying, I said, the realization dawning on me like a sunrise over a wasteland. The crying isn't just to scare me. No, Mira said. It is a psychological force multiplier. Think about it. They file the fake paper, then they start the campaign. They make you hear things. They make the neighbors think you are unstable. If you go to the police and sound crazy, it discredits you. If you fight the lien in court, they can paint you as an unreliable witness, the emotional divorced woman who hears ghosts in the basement. It was evil. It was purely, brilliantly evil. They were dismantling my credibility at the same time they were dismantling my financial security. Alice, Mira said, looking me in the eye, we can fight this. I will file an affidavit of forgery today. I will flag Northbridge Holdings, but you need to be careful. These people have invested time and money into this scam. If they realize you are fighting back, they might escalate. They already have, I said. But now I know what they are. I left Mira's office with a copy of the fraudulent filing in my purse. I drove home, my mind racing. The crying was the key. The crying was the emotional hook they were using to drag me down. And it was also the tool they were using to poison the neighborhood against me. The neighbors think you are unstable. I thought of Marjorie. Maple Hollow is sensitive to drama. Marjorie had been watching me. Marjorie had told me not to call the police. Marjorie knew I was divorced and vulnerable. I pulled into my driveway. I didn't go into my house. I walked straight across the lawn to Marjorie's front door. I banged on the wood. Marjorie! I called out. It took a moment. The door opened. Marjorie stood there in a floral apron, looking startled. Alice, she said, is everything okay? You look upset. I am upset. Marjorie, I said, stepping into her foyer without waiting for an invitation. I just came from my lawyer. We found a fraudulent lien filed against my house by a company called Northbridge Holdings, and I know you know something about it. Me? Marjorie pressed a hand to her chest. Alice, I don't know what you're talking about. Liens? That sounds terrible. Cut the act, I said. My voice was low and dangerous. You told me to keep the police away. You told me not to make a scene. And you have been watching my house like a hawk. Who did you talk to? Marjorie? Who did you tell about me? Marjorie's face crumbled. She backed up against the hallway table. I didn't mean any harm. He seemed so nice. Who? The man, she stammered. The community outreach man. He came by a few weeks ago. He was going door to door, asking about neighborhood safety. He asked about you. And what did you say? I was worried about you. Alice, Marjorie said, her eyes filling with tears. You have been so stressed since the divorce, working all the time. I told him you were a single mother, doing it all on your own. I told him I heard you. Well, I thought I heard you crying sometimes at night. You told a stranger I was emotionally unstable? I said you were overwhelmed, Marjorie cried. He said his organization helped people who were struggling with home maintenance. He said they could help you if things got too hard. He asked if you had family nearby, and I said, no, not really. I thought I was getting you resources. Alice? You gave him a target profile, I said brutally. You told him I was alone, stressed, and isolated. You gave him everything he needed to pick me. I didn't know, Marjorie wailed. He had a badge. He knew the town council members' names. What was his name? I demanded. I don't remember, Marjorie sobbed. It might have been Bill or Ben. He drove a gray car. Cal, I said. His name is Cal. I looked at her. She was a pathetic figure, trembling in her floral apron. She wasn't a mastermind. She was just a loose-lipped gossip who had handed me over to wolves because she wanted to feel important. Stay away from me, Marjorie, I said. If you see anything, you call the police. If you tell anyone else I am overwhelmed, I will sue you for slander. I walked out, leaving her crying in her hallway. I went back to my own house. The sun was setting. The shadows were stretching across the living room. I locked the door. I checked the cameras. I sat in the kitchen, eating a cold sandwich, waiting. Night came. At 9 o'clock, the house was silent. At 10 o'clock, I heard it. It started softly, a low rhythmic whimpering. Uh-huh-huh. Sniff. Uh-huh-huh. It wasn't coming from the vents in the bedroom this time. It was coming from the laundry room. Off the kitchen, I stood up. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked in the dark, guided by the sound. I stood in the doorway of the laundry room. The sound was emanating from the floor register vent behind the dryer. I knelt down. I pulled out my phone and hit record on the voice memo app. I held the phone close to the vent. The sound was clear. It was definitely the sound of a child crying, a terrified, lonely sound. But as I listened, really listened, I heard it, the catch. At the end of the sob, there was a tiny digital pop, a microscopic artifact of audio compression. And then, exactly 4 seconds later, the same sob repeated, the same pitch, the same duration, the same pop. It was a loop. It wasn't a person. It was a speaker. I grabbed a screwdriver from the shelf. I frantically unscrewed the vent cover. I pulled it off and shone my phone's flashlight down the duct. About 3 feet down, resting in the metal curve of the ductwork, was a small black box. It was about the size of a deck of cards. A tiny green light blinked on its side. I reached down. My arm scraped against the metal, but I grabbed it. I pulled it out. It was a Bluetooth speaker, a cheap, generic brand. It was connected to a small battery pack. The crying continued, vibrating in my hand. I found the power switch and clicked it off. Silence rushed back into the room. I sat on the laundry room floor, holding the device. It was plastic. It was mass-produced. It was fake. But the horror that washed over me was realer than anything I had felt yet. The crying was fake. The ghosts were fake. But the speaker was real. Someone had physically placed this here. Someone had walked into my house, unscrewed the vent, placed the device, and screwed it back on. And they had done it recently. Because battery packs don't last forever. They were coming in and out. They were maintaining the equipment of my torture. I looked at the black box in my hand. It wasn't just a speaker, it was a transmitter. If it was Bluetooth, it had a limited range, 30 feet, maybe 50 if it was high-end, which meant the source, the phone or tablet playing the audio file, had to be close. I stood up and ran to the window. I looked out into the darkness of the backyard. The woods, the neighbor's hedge, if the source was close. The person controlling it might still be there. I gripped the speaker until the plastic creaked. You want to play games? I thought, okay, let's play. The black plastic speaker sat on the interrogation table like a piece of evidence from a bomb site. In a way, it was It was a psychological explosive device designed to shatter my sense of safety. Detective Renee Calder stared at it. She didn't touch it. She had put on blue nitrile gloves before I even took it out of my purse. "You found this in the vent," she stated, not asking. "Behind the dryer," I said. "It was playing a loop. 4 seconds of crying. 4 seconds of silence. It is Bluetooth." Calder looked up at me. The professional detachment she had worn yesterday was gone. Her eyes were hard, focused, and angry. "This changes the classification," Calder said. "Trespassing is one thing, harassment is another, but planting electronic surveillance or broadcasting equipment inside a private residence, that pushes this into a different felony bracket. It implies a level of premeditation that we rarely see in standard burglaries." "They are not burglars," I said. My lawyer found a fraudulent lien filed against my deed. They want the equity. They are trying to drive me out." Calder nodded slowly. "We see this with commercial properties sometimes. Pressure tactics to force a sale, but targeting a single-family home in Maple Hollow? That is bold and dangerous." She stood up and paced the small room. "If this is a Bluetooth speaker, the battery life is limited, 12 hours. Maybe 20 if it is low output, which means they have to come back to swap it or charge it. They have established a pattern of maintenance." "So we wait for them," I said. "No," Calder said. "We invite them." She leaned over the table. "You are going to leave the house tonight. Alice, visibly. You are going to pack a suitcase. You are going to load up your car. You are going to make it look like you have finally cracked and you are fleeing to your mother's house. We need them to think the property is vacant. If they think you are gone, they will come back to retrieve their gear or plant the next phase of the harassment. And where will I actually be? You will be in an unmarked car at the end of the cul-de-sac with me," Calder said. "We will have 2 patrol units on the perimeter. We wait for the gray sedan. We wait for them to breach the perimeter, and then we take them." I felt a cold thrill of satisfaction. "I want to be there. You stay in the car," Calder warned. "But yes, you can watch." Leaving the station, I had a list of instructions. But before I went back to the stage, my house, I had one stop to make. I drove to Mira Halstead's office. The energy was different there too. Mira was on the phone when I walked in, her voice sharp and commanding. She waved me into a chair and hung up a moment later. "That was the fraud department at your bank," Mira said without preamble. "We have traced the merchant ID for Crestmore Title and Escrow." "Where are they?" I asked. "Ridgegate, New Jersey," Mira said. "It is a mailbox suite in a strip mall. Suite 404. We ran a search on the address. It is associated with 17 other LLCs in the last 3 years. Red Oak Funding. Clearview Assessments. Hearthstone Community Services." "Hearthstone," I said. "That is the name on the badge of the man who came to my door." "It is a mill," Mira said grimly. "They set up these shell companies, run a scam for 6 months until the heat gets too high, then dissolve them and start new ones. They target distressed properties, or properties they make distressed. Ridgegate police have a file on the address, but it is just a Dropbox. The actual operators could be anywhere." "They are here," I said. "They are in Maple Hollow. We flagged the accounts," Mira continued. "If they try to run your social security number again, the system will lock them out. But Alice, looking at the pattern, these people do not give up easily. They have filed a memorandum of option on your house. That is a document usually used by developers to reserve land. They are building a paper trail that makes it look like you agreed to sell." "Why?" I asked. "I never signed anything." "Because if you die, or if you disappear, or if you get committed for mental instability," Mira said softly, "that piece of paper gives them a priority claim on the deed. It is a long con." Committed for mental instability, the crying, the gaslighting, the neighbors thinking I was crazy. They are trying to break me so I can't testify against the forgery, I realized. "Exactly," Mira said. "Be careful tonight, Alice. I drove home with the weight of the conspiracy pressing down on me. It wasn't just a scam. It was an erasure. They wanted to erase my ownership, my credibility, my sanity. I arrived at the house at 4 in the afternoon. I had 3 hours before sunset. I began the performance. I dragged a large suitcase from the attic. I opened the windows in the bedroom so anyone watching from the street could see me packing. I threw clothes into the bag with exaggerated movements. I paced back and forth in front of the window, holding my head in my hands, acting the part of the distraught woman. But while I was packing, I was also setting the trap. I went to the basement. I left the overhead light off, but I plugged in a small nightlight near the stairs. Enough illumination to see a silhouette, but not enough to warn them off. I took the cheap Bluetooth speaker I had found, the one I had taken to the police, and I put it back. But I didn't put it in the vent. I put it inside a plastic storage bin near the bulkhead doors. I left the lid of the bin slightly askew. If they came back, they would look for their device. When they couldn't hear it, they would search. I wanted them to spend time in the basement. I checked the camera I had mounted on the steel beam. It was active. I checked the birdhouse camera in the kitchen. Active. By 6 o'clock, I was ready. I lugged the suitcase downstairs. I threw a few more bags into the trunk of my car for effect. I locked the front door. I stood on the porch, looking at the house as if I was saying goodbye, wiping a fake tear from my cheek. I was just turning to the car when a voice called out, "Alice! Alice! Wait!" I froze. Marjorie Sloane was hurrying across the lawn. She was wearing a breathless, panicked expression. She was wringing her hands in her apron. "Oh, thank God I caught you," Marjorie panted, stopping at the edge of the driveway. "I saw the suitcase. You are leaving?" "Yes, Marjorie," I said, keeping my voice loud enough for any watchers to hear. "I can't stay here anymore. It is too much." "Oh, Alice," Marjorie wailed. She stepped closer, invading my personal space. "I feel terrible. I haven't slept a wink since you came over yesterday. I need you to know I didn't mean it." "Marjorie, please," I said, trying to edge around her. "I have to go." "No, listen to me," she insisted, grabbing my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "I baked you a casserole. It is in my kitchen. Let me get it for you. You can't leave on an empty stomach. And maybe I can watch the house for you? I can water the plants?" She was trying to check on me. She was trying to assuage her own guilt by inserting herself back into my life. But she was standing right in the sightline of the driveway. If the gray sedan was watching, they would see her. They would see a neighbor paying attention. That might spook them. "I don't want your casserole, Marjorie," I said. "But I want to help," she cried, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "I feel so responsible. I just wanted you to be safe." Something inside me snapped. The months of polite smiles, of nodding while she gave unsolicited advice, of knowing she had fed my vulnerability to a predator, it all boiled over. I dropped my car keys. They clattered on the asphalt. "You want to help?" I hissed, stepping into her face. "You want to feel better? Then go back to your house and shut your blinds." "Alice," she whimpered. "You didn't want me to be safe," I said, my voice shaking with a cold, hard rage I had never let her see. "You wanted something to talk about. You wanted to be the benevolent matriarch of the street who pities the poor divorced woman. You traded my privacy for 5 minutes of attention from a stranger with a clipboard. You nearly destroyed my life. Marjorie, you don't get to fix it with a tuna casserole." Marjorie recoiled, as if I had slapped her. Her mouth opened and closed. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I never... "Go home," I commanded. "If you cross this property line again, I will have you arrested for trespassing. Do you understand me?" She nodded, terrified. She turned and fled, shuffling back across the lawn to her house. She slammed her door. I took a deep breath. My hands were trembling, but my head was clear. I picked up my keys. I got into my car. I backed out of the driveway. I drove down the street, turning left at the stop sign. I drove 2 miles, looped around the neighborhood, and parked in the lot of the elementary school. A dark SUV pulled up next to me. The window rolled down. Detective Calder was in the driver's seat. "Get in," she said. I climbed into the passenger seat of the unmarked police vehicle. It smelled of stale coffee and radio static. "Did anyone see you circle back?" Calder asked. "No, I took the long way." "Good. We are parked 3 houses down from you. In the driveway of the vacant rental, we have a clear view of your street." Calder handed me a tablet. It was linked to their surveillance. But she also let me pull up my own camera feed. "Now," she said. "We wait." The waiting was the hardest part. The sun went down. The streetlights flickered on, casting pools of yellow light on the asphalt. The neighborhood went quiet. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. "Maybe they aren't coming," I whispered. "They will come," Calder said. "Predators are creatures of opportunity. You just created a vacuum. They will want to fill it." At 8:45, a car turned onto Cedar Lane. It was a gray sedan, an older model Ford Taurus, no front plate. My breath caught in my throat. "That is it. That is the car." "Hold," Calder said into her radio. "Target in sight. Let him commit." The car drove slowly past my house. It didn't stop. It continued to the end of the cul-de-sac, turned around, and came back. It parked on the street, 2 houses down. In front of the Miller's place, the lights went off. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then, the driver's door opened. A figure stepped out. He was dressed in dark clothes, black jeans, a black hoodie. He wore a baseball cap. He carried a small toolkit in one hand. He walked casually down the sidewalk. He didn't look suspicious. He looked like a guy walking home, but when he reached the edge of my property, he cut across the lawn. He moved with that same confident, practiced gait I had seen on the video. He knew where the shadows were. He disappeared around the side of the house. "He is heading for the bulkhead," I said. I looked at my phone screen. The camera I had mounted on the beam in the basement was live. Nothing yet. "Wait for the breach," Calder murmured. On the screen, the bulkhead doors shuttered. Then, they lifted. A sliver of moonlight cut into the dark basement. A pair of legs appeared on the steps. "He is in," I said. "Go," Calder said into the radio. "Move in. Box him." The SUV we were in roared to life. Calder slammed on the gas, peeling out of the driveway. 2 other patrol cars, which had been parked on parallel streets, screeched around the corner, their lights flashing blue and red, painting the neighborhood in chaotic strobes. We pulled up to the front of my house just as the first officer sprinted around the side yard. "Police! Show me your hands!" a voice shouted. I scrambled out of the SUV, ignoring Calder's order to stay put. I ran to the edge of the driveway. I heard crashing in the backyard, the sound of a metal trash can tipping over. "He is running!" someone yelled. "North side! He jumped the fence!" "Perimeter! Cut him off at the creek!" I ran to the backyard. The bulkhead doors were wide open, gaping like a mouth. Officer Miller, the same one who had dismissed me, was standing by the fence, shining his flashlight into the dense woods that separated my lot from the next subdivision. "He is gone," Miller panted. "He is fast." "Did you get a visual?" Calder asked. Coming up behind me. "White male, medium build. Hoodie up." He dropped his bag when he went over the fence. Miller pointed to the grass near the bulkhead. Lying in the dew was a small canvas tool bag, and next to it, scattered like fallen leaves, was a packet of papers. I walked over to them. Calder shone her light on the ground. "Don't touch them," she warned. I leaned in. The top paper was a standard manila folder, but it had spilled open. I saw a photocopy of my driver's license, the one missing from my office. I saw a printout of my bank statement, and I saw a document, typed on thick bond paper, titled Voluntary Relocation and Settlement Agreement. I read the first paragraph in the beam of the flashlight. I, Alice Henderson, being of unsound mind and acknowledging an inability to maintain the property due to acute psychological distress, hereby agree to vacate the premises at 412 Cedar Lane in exchange for a one-time relocation stipend of $5,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. Unsound mind, I whispered. Acute psychological distress. Calder crouched down, using a pen to lift the edge of another paper. It was a handwritten note, scrawled on a yellow legal pad. Subject status: high susceptibility. Reports hearing voices. Neighbors confirm instability. Isolate and escalate pressure. Target is organized but emotional. Push for settlement before family intervenes. I stared at the words. Hearing voices. They hadn't just been scaring me. They had been building a case file. They were documenting my descent into madness, so that when they finally shoved this agreement in front of me, or when they forged my signature on it, they would have a stack of evidence to show a judge. Look, she was crazy. She heard crying in the basement. She begged us to take the house. It wasn't a robbery, Calder said, her voice low and furious. It was a diagnosis. They were diagnosing you as incompetent so they could steal your life. I looked at the bulkhead doors. The lock I had bought, the chain I had wrapped, it was all still there, but cut. Bolt cutters lay in the grass. He targeted you because you were perfect, Calder said, standing up and looking at me. You have equity, you have a job, you pay your bills. You are the kind of person who tries to solve problems logically. They knew if they introduced something illogical, something you couldn't explain, you would try to fix it until you broke. I didn't break, I said. No, Calder said. You didn't. A ringtone cut through the night air. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Calder's. It was coming from the grass. A cheap black flip phone, a burner, was lying near the tool bag. It was ringing. Calder pulled a handkerchief from her pocket and picked it up. She looked at the screen. Unknown number, she said. She didn't answer it. She let it ring until it went to voicemail. We have his phone, Calder said. And we have his fingerprints on these papers. We might not have caught him tonight, Alice, but he left his life behind. I walked back to the front of the house. The blue lights were still spinning, attracting neighbors. I saw faces in windows. I saw people on porches. Let them look. I wasn't the crazy woman in 412 anymore. I was the woman with the police battalion on her lawn. My own phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Sophie. My heart seized. It was 9:30. She should be asleep, I answered, turning my back to the flashing lights. Soph? I said, forcing my voice into a register of calm, warm normalcy. Mommy? Her voice was small and thick with tears. I can't sleep. I miss you. Oh, sweetie, I said, clutching the phone like a lifeline. I miss you too. Is everything okay? I had a bad dream, she said. I dreamt the house was making noises. Are you okay? Is the house okay? A chill went through me. Even 60 miles away, she felt it. The house is fine, baby, I lied. I looked at the police officers dusting the gray sedan for prints. I looked at the open bulkhead. Everything is perfectly quiet here. I am just reading a book. Okay, Sophie sniffled. I love you. I love you too. Go back to sleep. I will see you soon. I hung up. And then, for the first time in 4 days, I started to shake. I shook so hard I had to lean against the hood of the police car. They had come so close. If I had been weaker, if I had signed that paper, if I had let them gaslight me into believing I was unstable, Sophie would have come home to a mother who had sold her birthright for $5,000 and a diagnosis of insanity. They hadn't just attacked my house. They had attacked my ability to be her mother. Calder walked over to me. She put a hand on my shoulder. We need to process the scene, she said. You can't stay here tonight. Do you have somewhere to go? I am going to Tessa's, I said. But detective? Yes. The papers, I said. The relocation agreement, the fake lien, the recording of the crying. We are logging it all as evidence. Can I use copies? I asked. Calder frowned. Use them for what? To show people, I said. To show Maple Hollow. Marjorie isn't the only one they talk to. There are other people on this street who got letters. There are other people who think they are hearing things. I looked at the official correspondence letter from the fake housing board that was still in my purse. They thrive on shame, I said. They thrive on us being too embarrassed to talk about it. I want to blow the lid off. Calder looked at me for a long moment. Then, a small, grim smile touched her lips. Technically, it is an open investigation, she said. But if you were to hold a neighborhood watch meeting, and if you were to share your personal experience, I couldn't stop you. In fact, it might flush out more witnesses. Good, I said. I looked back at my house. It was violated. It was messy, but it was mine. I am not just going to defend myself anymore, I said. I am going to burn their whole operation down. The Maple Hollow Civic Room was a sterile box of a space, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee, usually reserved for heated debates about zoning variances or the annual pumpkin festival budget. Tonight, however, the air was thick with a different kind of tension. I had arranged 20 metal folding chairs in a semicircle, but 30 people had shown up. They stood along the back walls, arms crossed, faces tight with a mixture of curiosity and defensiveness. I stood at the front of the room, behind a folding table stacked with manila folders. My hands were steady, resting on the cool laminate surface. 4 days ago, I had been a trembling wreck, holding a kitchen knife in the dark. Tonight, I was the prosecutor of a crime that no one else in this room even realized had been committed against them. To my right sat Mira Halstead, looking formidable in a charcoal suit. To my left was Detective Renee Calder, in plain clothes, her badge clipped discreetly to her belt, and in the front row, looking like he wanted to sink through the floor, was Evan Rourke, twisting his baseball cap in his hands. "Thank you all for coming," I began. My voice did not shake. "Most of you know me. I am Alice Henderson. I live on Cedar Lane. The flyer I put in your mailboxes said this meeting was about fraud awareness. That is a polite way of saying that our town is being hunted." A murmur rippled through the room. I saw skepticism in some eyes, the look that said, "There goes the divorced lady," stirring up drama. "I know what some of you are thinking," I said, meeting the gaze of a man named Tom, who lived 2 streets over. "You think this is about a stolen credit card or a porch pirate. You think if you lock your doors, you are safe." I thought that too. But the people targeting Maple Hollow do not need to break your door down. They get you to open it for them. I nodded to Mira. Mira stood up. She didn't use a microphone. She didn't need one. Her voice projected with the crisp authority of a courtroom veteran. She picked up a laser pointer and clicked a remote. A projector screen behind us lit up with a scan of a document. "This," Mira said, pointing to the dense legal text, "is a memorandum of interest. It was filed with the county clerk 2 weeks ago against Ms. Henderson's property. It claims that a company called Northbridge Holdings, LLC, has an exclusive option to purchase her home. It is a cloud on her title. If she tried to refinance or sell today, she couldn't. The bank would freeze her out." "I never signed that," I said clearly. "It is a forgery. Northbridge Holdings does not exist," Mira continued. "It is a shell entity registered to a drop box in Ridgegate, New Jersey. But look at this." She clicked the remote. The screen changed to the letter I had received, the one from the fake housing review board. "This letter threatens a $5,000 fine for code violations," Mira said. "It directs the homeowner to call a number to schedule an inspection. And this," click, the consent form from Hearthstone Community Services appeared, "is a limited power of attorney disguised as a grant application." Mira explained, "If you sign this, you are giving these strangers legal authority to access your bank records and negotiate debt on your behalf. They create the problem with the lien. They scare you with the inspection letter, and then they offer the solution with the grant. It is a closed loop, a trap designed to extract a settlement payment or steal the equity in your home." The room was silent now. The skepticism was fading, replaced by a creeping unease. "But the paperwork is just the finale," I said, stepping forward again. "The real weapon is the fear they use to get you to sign." I picked up my phone. I had connected it to the room's sound system. For 3 nights, I heard crying in my house. I said, "It came from the basement. It came from the vents. It sounded like a child. It sounded like someone was trapped and suffering." I called the police. They found nothing. I thought I was losing my mind. I thought the stress of my divorce was making me hallucinate. I looked at Marjorie Sloane, who was sitting in the 3rd row. She was staring at her lap, her face pale. "I wasn't hallucinating," I said, "and neither are you." I hit play. The sound filled the civic room. It was the recording I had captured in the laundry room. The high-pitched, desolate whimpering of a child. People flinched. A woman in the back covered her mouth. It was a visceral sound, primal and distressing. I let it play for 10 seconds. Then I hit pause. "Horrifying, isn't it?" I asked. "It makes you want to help. It makes you want to call someone. It makes you panic." I tapped the screen of my phone. "Now, listen to this." I played a second audio file. It was a YouTube video, a compilation of scary prank sounds uploaded 5 years ago. The exact same crying played. Same pitch, same intake of breath, same timing. I paused it. "It is a stock sound effect," I said. "You can download it for 99 cents. The people doing this didn't have a child. They had a Bluetooth speaker and a playlist." The tension in the room snapped. I saw anger now. Real, hot anger. "They played a recording of a crying child through my vents," I said, my voice rising. "They wanted me to believe my house was haunted, or that there was a squatter. They wanted my neighbors to hear it so they would think I was unstable. They wanted to isolate me so that when the fake legal notices started arriving, I would be too embarrassed and too terrified to fight back." Evan stood up then. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at his boots. "I heard it too," Evan said. His voice was thick. "I was mowing Alice's lawn. I heard the crying. But then, I heard a man." The room went dead quiet. "I was right by the bulkhead doors," Evan said. "I heard a guy whisper. He said, 'Shh,' real sharp, like he was telling someone to be quiet. I thought it was a ghost or something, but it wasn't. It was a guy standing in the basement, waiting for me to leave." "This isn't a ghost story," I said. "It is a home invasion. It is a coordinated attack." I pointed to the back of the room, where Sarah Jenkins, the bank manager, was standing. "Sarah?" I asked. Sarah stepped forward. She looked grim. "After Alice came to me with the fraudulent pre-authorization from Crestmore Title, I ran a query on our local branch activity. In the last 6 months, 12 accounts in Maple Hollow have had small, verify-only transactions from entities linked to that same merchant ID. Most were for $0, just pings to see if the account was active." "12?" a man asked from the back. "Who?" "I can't give names due to privacy," Sarah said. "But they are all similar profiles. Single-income households, seniors living alone, people with significant equity who might be distracted. They are testing the locks on your bank accounts," I said. "Just like they tested the locks on my doors." Detective Calder walked to the front of the room. Her presence shifted the energy from community outrage to legal reality. "We have opened a formal investigation," Calder said. "The evidence Ms. Henderson collected, the speaker, the fake documents, the surveillance footage of the intruder, has been linked to a wider pattern. This group operates across state lines. They are not local kids pranking you. They are professionals. They use public records to find vulnerable homeowners. They file the paper clouds, and then they deploy the psychological pressure." "Why haven't you caught them?" someone shouted. "We missed the guy at Alice's house by 30 seconds, Calder admitted. "He left behind a burner phone and a toolkit. We are processing them for DNA and prints. But these groups are nomadic. They hit a town, harvest what they can, and move on when the heat gets too high." "So we are just supposed to wait?" Marjorie spoke up. Her voice was trembling. She looked around the room, her eyes wet. I looked at her. I hadn't forgiven her, but I needed her testimony. It was the linchpin. "Marjorie," I said gently, "tell them about the man." Marjorie stood up. She clutched her purse in front of her like a shield. "He came to my door," she whispered. "About a month ago. He had a badge. He said he was from community outreach. He seemed so kind." She took a shaky breath. "He asked about the neighborhood. He asked who lived where. He asked who might need extra support. And I told him about Alice. I told him she was divorced. I told him she was stressed. I told him I thought she was overwhelmed." Marjorie began to cry, but not the fake, manipulative tears of the recording. These were tears of shame. "I thought I was helping," she sobbed. "I thought he was going to send a social worker. I gave him her schedule. I told him when her daughter was going away." A collective gasp went through the room. "You told him when the house would be empty?" Tom asked, incredulous. "I didn't know," Marjorie wailed. "He made me feel like I was being a good neighbor." "That is how they work," I said, cutting off the judgment before it could turn into a mob. "They weaponize our community against us. They use our politeness. They use our gossip." Marjorie gave them the intel, yes, but she didn't know she was talking to a scout for a criminal ring. I walked over to the table and picked up the last piece of evidence. It was a single sheet of paper, protected in a plastic sleeve. "But here is the thing," I said. "They made a mistake. They got arrogant." I held up the paper. "This is a copy of the lease agreement for the mailbox suite in Ridgegate, New Jersey," I said. "My lawyer, Mira, pulled it through a subpoena this morning. It is signed by the registered agent for Crestmore Title." I looked at the crowd. "The name on the lease is a fake, Robert Thorne. But the signature?" I pointed to the screen, where Mira projected a zoomed-in image of the signature. It was a distinct, spiky scrawl, the R looped backward in a very specific way. "I have seen this signature before," I said, "and so have some of you." I turned to the town clerk, Mrs. Gable, who was sitting near the front. "Mrs. Gable," I said, "do you remember the vendor application for the 4th of July fireworks show last year? The company that did the pyrotechnics?" Mrs. Gable squinted at the screen. Her hand went to her throat. "That is the same signature," she whispered. "That is the signature of the man who ran the safety check." "Exactly," I said. "He wasn't just a random scammer from New Jersey. He has been here. He has been working in our town, under different company names. For at least a year, he has been inside the Civic Center. He has been at our festivals. He wasn't casing houses from a car. He was casing them while he was setting up fireworks." The realization hit the room like a physical blow. The enemy wasn't a faceless voice on the phone. It was the guy they had waved to at the parade. It was the contractor they had led into the park. "We gave his description to the state police," Calder said. "We have a face now. We have a connection. And because of this meeting, because Alice refused to settle and stay quiet, we are going to find him." I looked out at the faces of my neighbors. They looked scared. Yes, but they also looked awake. They weren't looking at their phones. They were looking at each other, realizing that the safety of Maple Hollow wasn't a guarantee. It was something they had to defend. "Go home," I told them. "Check your bank statements. Check your credit reports. Look at your door frames. And if you hear crying in the night, don't hide under the covers. Grab a flashlight and find the source. Because the only way we stop them is if we stop being afraid of the noise." The meeting ended, but nobody left immediately. They clustered in groups, exchanging information, writing down the number for Mira's office. Marjorie tried to catch my eye, but I turned away. I wasn't ready for her apology. Not yet. I drove home alone. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the meeting began to ebb, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. My hands felt heavy on the steering wheel. I pulled into my driveway. The house was dark. I sat in the car for a moment, just breathing. I had won. The voluntary relocation agreement was evidence in a police locker. The fraudulent lien was being expunged. The intruder was on the run. But as I looked at the house, I knew it would never feel quite the same. The innocence of the structure was gone. It wasn't just a home anymore. It was a fortress I had successfully defended. I got out of the car and walked to the front door. I unlocked it with my new key, the one I had cut myself, the one that never left my person. I stepped inside. The silence was absolute. "Hello?" I whispered, just out of habit. The house did not answer. No settling groans, no hum of the refrigerator, just the stillness of a place that was empty. I walked through the kitchen. I checked the back door. The reinforcement screws Nolan had installed were solid. I went to the basement door. I hesitated. Part of me, the part that had stood in the civic room and commanded a crowd, wanted to just lock it and go to bed. But the other part, the part that had learned to think like a predator, knew I had to look. I opened the door. I flipped the switch. I walked down the wooden stairs. The basement was exactly as I had left it. The storage bin was there. The camera was blinking its steady red eye from the beam. I walked over to the bulkhead doors. I inspected the lock. It was engaged. The chain was tight. I checked the hasp. No new scratches. It was secure. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was over. I turned to go back upstairs. As I walked past the furnace, my eye caught something. The main air intake vent for the HVAC system was located on the side of the furnace unit. It was a large metal grate, held in place by 4 hex head screws. I had checked this vent 2 days ago. I had tightened all 4 screws myself when I was sweeping for bugs. I stopped. I shone my phone's flashlight on the bottom left screw. It was loose, not falling out, just backed out about 3 turns. The metal around the head was bright and shiny, devoid of dust. I stared at it. If the intruder had been chased off the property 2 nights ago, if the police had been patrolling, who had unscrewed it? I looked closer. There was a tiny smudge on the metal of the furnace casing. Right next to the screw. It looked like a fingerprint, but it was smeared, smudged in fresh oil. The police had processed the scene outside. They hadn't come back down here today. I felt a coldness start at the base of my spine and radiate outward. Someone had been here, today. While I was at the meeting, they hadn't come to plant a speaker. They hadn't come to steal. They had come to listen. Or maybe they had come to retrieve something they had left inside the ductwork that I hadn't found yet. I looked up at the ceiling, at the floorboards that separated me from my living room. I wasn't the only one studying the opposition. I had held a meeting to expose them. I had shown their face. I had mocked their tactics. And someone had been down here, quietly unscrewing a vent, perhaps listening to the silence of the house. Knowing I would come back feeling victorious, I reached out and touched the screw. It was warm. The furnace wasn't running. I turned around slowly, scanning the shadows of the basement. The silence wasn't empty. It was heavy. It was watching. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I took a quarter from my pocket. I placed it in the slot of the screw. I tightened it. Click. "I know you are there," I whispered to the dark. I walked up the stairs. I locked the door. I pushed the heavy oak dresser in the hallway in front of it. Then I went to the kitchen and made a cup of tea. I sat in the living room, the knife on the table next to me, the iPad screen glowing with the camera feeds. The war wasn't over. It had just moved to a new phase. They knew I was ready, and I knew they were still hungry. I took a sip of tea. It was bitter. "Come and try," I said to the empty room. I waited for the morning. Thank you for listening to I Hear Crying from your basement. I hope this story made you check your own locks a little tighter tonight. Revenge isn't always about explosions and chases. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply refusing to be the victim they want you to be. I would love to know where you are listening from. Drop your country or city in the comments below. It is always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories. I have many more tales of justice and retribution waiting for you. And please, share your thoughts in English in the comments. What would you have done if you heard that crying? Would you have opened the door? Stay safe and trust your instincts.